education, engaging the entrepreneurial spirit. I'm Mitzi, or Andrew Middleton, as you may know me, and this is presented by Upschool Educator PD at the Wade Institute of Entrepreneurship and HEX, who are creating a generation of leaders. They have a blend of industry, academics, and Gen Z, and we're excited to welcome them into this mix as well. I'm very excited. Today we're going to have Kara Baxter from Strathcona and Jeanette from HEX talking about the future of education and innovation. And I think I'm going to learn as much as anyone else out there. To begin with, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation from where I'm presenting today, pay my respects to the elders past and present, and also acknowledge Indigenous people throughout the lands where you might be coming from today. On the agenda today, it's really about the great questions that you have sent in when you registered, and we'll be hearing from Jeanette and Kara answering these questions and bringing their own learnings and experiences to the questions. So now I'd like to hand over to them to start innovating future education, engaging the entrepreneurial spirit. Welcome, Jeanette and Kara.
Hello.
Hi Mitzi. Hi, Kara.
Hi everyone out there.
Nice to see you. Kara, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm well. I'm dialing in from beautiful sunny Melbourne. It's sunny and cold here in Wurundjeri land in Brunswick. And what about yourself?
Yes, I'm dialing in from sunny Strathcona. So it's great to be able to have a chat and also get any extra questions that might come through as well.
Fantastic. Now, we actually had some really interesting questions submitted prior to this event. So I think it's a really great time to just go straight into it. And the very first thing that we have is the current state and trends that we're sort of seeing in our worlds. Now, something we've been doing is actually going around Australia and working with the Academy of Enterprising Girls, where we've been working with a whole bunch of Year 10s everywhere, but you're seeing it every day in the classroom. Are there a few trends that just come to mind that you'd like to share with everybody as a starting point?
Well, currently I'm the Dean of Teaching and Learning at Strathcona Girls Grammar, and we have a really amazing programs around entrepreneurship and sort of innovation, but I've also been a Deputy Principal at John Paul in Frankston and also Head of Teaching and Learning at Mentone Grammar. So I think what's amazing when you start to work across different schools over the last few years is the fact that there's more and more focus on the capabilities and making sure that we're looking at future focused skills for the students. So here at Strathcona, we're really trying to, unpack the, Tony Wagner's sort of work on those 7 survival skills in the 21st century and really trying to help develop our curriculum that really develops those thinking skills, initiative, collaboration, problem solving. And I think as we keep moving forward in what was the traditional, VCE pathway and how universities now are not always expecting that ATAR score and we have early entry, I think it's more and more important that we start to really move away from just worrying about the knowledge that we need to impart to students, but worry about the skills and the future focused nature of education, because I think most students expect more now and they know that they can Google something in about 20 seconds and get the answer.
Yes, it's so much less about the actual content and so much more about what they can do with it, right? I think you mentioned the Tony Wagner 7 skills. It kind of dovetails beautifully to this concept we've been working on at HEX called exponential intelligence. And it's kind of a qualitative, quantitative piece that we've been working on with our alumni. And we've actually come up with 30 different capabilities under the headlines of mindsets, skill sets, and tool sets. And very similar, all of these are very much about how do you think about the future? Are you the kind of person who can do make or breaker skills? Like, do you have community building capabilities? Like, very different to, do you know how to code Python?
Exactly.
Right. And actually,
it's good that they start with Python.
it's helpful. Well, it's interesting because I was actually there was a conference I attended recently in Las Vegas, and yes, I promise it was actually for work. But we were hearing from this woman called Dr. Fei Li, and she's one of the godparents of like visual AI development. And she basically was saying that we've almost come full circle, where there was a huge bent on STEM skills and then like creativity skills and then enterprise skills. And she's like, what is the next wave? Because like now that AI has kind of like covered STEM and humanity, she's like, what is the next thing? And it seems to be back to human skills, human-centered humanity skills.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
I think here at Strathcona especially, we've got a real focus on our whole being and talking about empathy and how we create, our students being in not only, the entrepreneurial mindset, but also to be in like the mindset of others. So I think what we're really trying to do, we use, design thinking principles across our school, visible thinking from Project Zero. And we're really trying to incorporate those thinking skills across subject areas too, because that only helps develop those mindsets that you're talking about with your program. So it's not about what we learn, but how we learn, and being in the center of it from your own sort of mindset, I think is really important.
Could I actually ask you, so you mentioned design thinking skills across all subjects. Do you have like a really cool
many as we can.
As many as you can. Do you have an example of like how you might use design thinking skills in like an unexpected subject? Like, so I think people would see like business or, as being like a traditional design thinking place to use design thinking skills. What other subjects can you use it in that like that people might not realize?
So we've got a new sort of well-being and inquiry subject in year 7 and 8. So not only is it trying for students to like unpack their understanding about self, but we're using the design thinking principles to really unpack those bigger questions and to prototype, make their own learner profile and really go through that, like empathize. So go through those stages. So, a lot of the time I think in schools we use the design thinking principles a lot in probably the art subjects or the design subjects, but we're also trying to implement it into, our inquiry process. So even when they're going to, do a humanities task at the moment, they're really trying to incorporate those elements as well.
That's so fascinating. It's interesting, actually, when I think about my background and my some of my business partner bagged, we actually have sociology and economics sort of studies. And I think that sort of thinking about that thematics of, the human-centered design also comes to, society design and our obligation to people and planet. And I think that really is one of those things where sometimes we forget entrepreneurship can play a really, really big part, is thinking about those massive challenges as well.
And I think it's exciting when you're at a P to 12 school as well, that our junior school really emphasizes, the unpacking of the thinking as well, which really accelerates what we can do with the students across year 7, 8, and 9. So our probably grade 6 and our year 9 programs really have those flagship entrepreneurial programs to really get the girls engaged in that ownership of them creating their own sort of business or their big ideas and seeing how they can really flourish with those.
So do you think that there are particular age groups or sort of stages where this kind of thinking comes in more strongly? So you said grade 6 and year 9 is where you've got your flagships. Is that sort of based on some sort of developmental thinking, or is it more of like just what you've observed that works well at school?
I think it's a bit of both. I think also looking at like most of the other teachers sort of out there are also looking at, our curriculum as well. And there's, emphasis in certain year levels of the curriculum where you can really then start to develop this naturally. And obviously a big part of business and economics for grade 6 is a good opportunity if you wanted to try and start that a little bit earlier. Sort of the same with year 9. But again, we're trying to mesh those thinking skills across our sort of middle school as we go now, because by the time the girls get to BCE, you want their mindsets to be already there, to be going, okay, how can I rethink this, or how can I take a bit more ownership of this too?
That's so fascinating. Now, I do want to just say hi to anyone who's just joined us. We've got a couple of people saying hello in the chat. So Priya, Eleanor, nice to see you here. And anyone else who's around, it's really great to have you online with us. I'm Jeanette. This is Kara. Actually, we should probably give people some context about why we're even in the room together. So we're obviously here with a HEX Wade Institute kind of event. Did you want to give everybody a bit of a context of what brought you into this room?
Yes, so I've worked with the Wade Institute across sort of 3 schools that I've been at recently, and I've really seen the benefit of, staff experiencing the Wade Institute teachers up school. And then obviously when you're trying to, again, I suppose, really have innovation as like a growing hub. And I know hopefully people from Mentone Grammar are also in the background on this. They can attest to the fact that the up school like had that gap for staff when you're like, okay, if we really want to bring something forward and how do we do that? It was a really quick way for other staff to be able to connect with other schools and think, oh, this is how it could really look.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And just for context, so I'm Jeanette. I'm the CEO and co-founder of HEX, and we are what I would call an education like enabler. So we've been running entrepreneurship and innovation programs mostly at the university and tertiary level for about 7 years. And our journey into the high school space is fairly early. We've only been hanging out with high schools for about the last 2.5 years, and it's been an absolute trial by fire entering this industry in these last few years. But really what we're all about is to see if we can bring these future focused skills into curriculum, or at least aligned as close as we can. So we've been recently successful in having an AQF7, which is like a tertiary undergrad course, approved to all of the HEX programs that we deliver. We also have achieved ATAR accreditation in South Australia and Northern Territory, as well as SACE and QCE points. So we're working on basically saying if students must or should be going to school and possibly higher education, we want to give them the chance to experience innovation and entrepreneurship as part of their experience. So, and I know so many hardworking educators are like trying to add it into different things or add it as different extra co-curricular. We just want it to be part of the journey, which I think you're doing so well at Strathcona. So that's our context. So was that a question that just flashed on the screen about how did we start our journey into education? Do you have like a very quick story about how you got into education there, Kara?
My journey was actually, I started in human resources first, and then I was working in that sort of field and thought, you know what, I really want to, make a change. I think like most teachers will probably say that cliche sort of line. And then, I went into education, and then I was lucky enough just to be given some opportunities around leadership. And definitely when I got into the classroom space, I was passionate to make sure that the experience was a bit different. And I think that's why I've continued to work in schools in that teaching and learning space, because I want it to be engaging. I want it to allow students to actually take their own learning to the next level, rather than just sticking with the industrial model that we all feel like probably gets jam-packed in when it comes to looking at either Victorian curriculum or the Australian curriculum. So I think hopefully most people on this sort of talk as well are wanting those tips and tricks to go, okay, how can we flip this slightly? And I think my tip is always about sort of starting small, but getting those adapters on early. And I think that's been probably part of our success at a couple of schools that I've worked at, is just to ensure that, there's a couple of really passionate educators out there, and you want to create a different sort of learning experience. So let's, plan it out and give it a go.
I love that. That's very inspiring. And I totally agree. Sometimes it's about finding one or two champions within your school or within whatever institution you happen to be in, because you kind of build your community of practice internally, and then you show a couple of wins and it sort of snowballs from there. Just very quickly, because I know that we're moving to our next topic, but the reason I got into education was actually through my corporate career. So I had 14 years in the corporate sector, sort of in product development, marketing and innovation, nothing to do with education. Although I probably should have seen the writing on the wall, because my dad was a professor of economics back in the day. But essentially my why is that I just want to see a more diverse and youthful group of people making choices about the future of technology, business and government. And I want that to happen quickly. And so for me, it was more about how can I very quickly empower a generation to step into their leadership and build new solutions for the world. And I thought education is the pathway, it's the how, connecting them to the networks. It's almost like exposure therapy to the world of innovation, and then just getting them to practice so that by the time they get into the workforce, they're already ready and they don't have to wait 14 years like I did to start their journey. Okay, and for any teachers who are dialed in, we'd love to see your journey as well. Feel free to drop it in the chat. We'd love to hear where you came from before. Okay, question on the screen. How do we navigate the balance between traditional education practices and innovative approaches? Well, I think you started to answer that question, Kara, with finding champions. Do you have any other tips for this question specifically?
Whatever team I'm working with around sort of changing practice is, again, like you sort of pointed out before, it's about what's the why, or what do we want to do? How do we want to ensure that our students have, developed their thinking or their learning? So I think it's always taking a step back and going, well, what is the priority? And then looking at how you develop that curriculum and the key sort of, I suppose, processes of pedagogy that you want to put in place around there. But I think it's, we can get stuck really easily in, oh, this is what we should do, but you can take a step back and go, well, how can we do this better?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to kind of pivot that to a question that's just come into the chat about, how do we get more high school students to think about their entrepreneurial pathways in addition to conventional career options? And it's kind of, I sometimes feel it's an interesting dichotomy between traditional and innovation, whereas I actually see it more as like an iteration, right? Like we will never be able to complete, like I think it does us all a disservice to think about an old and a new. I think we need to think about it as an evolution of what we're doing both in classroom and also in the future of work. And I'll just, if you can indulge me for a second, there was a story I had from a careers event I went to recently where I'd just done a little talk thing and a dad put his hand up and he said, this is all well and good for those who like tech, but my daughter's going to be a lawyer, so she doesn't need this stuff. And I just thought, mate, first of all, but I think, for somebody who thinks like that, which is a bit of a challenge because a lot of students might be growing up in households where they have very linear expectations or traditional expectations. I think my answer is that wouldn't it be amazing if every lawyer, every engineer, every doctor, every teacher, every hairdresser, if every single profession had the chance to think about the future that they wanted to live in and had the chance to create it. So I would always say at HEX, we try to take the seed of what really drives a student, if it is the law or if it is food or animals, and we try to apply and overlay entrepreneurship to that. What do you think, Kara?
Yes, I think that's like a fantastic response. And I think that's what's interesting that I was going to comment on. I think what's really amazing with our Year 9 Envision program, where we do a big unit on entrepreneurship and go through the processes of, students starting their own business or coming up with their ideas. What's really great that links to then those future pathways is then the parents see their daughter in a different sort of light. One of the girls, came up with, designing some of her own jewelry or things like that. And then the parents were on board to think, oh my God, look at what she's achieved. And maybe, rather than, we have a few parents that sometimes, think in a very traditional pathway, they were more open to think, okay, what would it maybe be subjects at the moment to start to support her if that's like what she wants to do and start her own business. So I think in sometimes that education of, the parent piece, it's being open to the fact that if you start running some of these programs in your curriculum, it's the student is nearly selling the new pathway themselves. Yes. And they just want the school to be able to support that pathway.
Exactly. That we've actually noticed when we travel around the country and speak to different groups of students in different cities, there's actually a really interesting distinction about, when I say who knows what they want to be when they grow up and you get different hands going. Some cities will have really strong yeses, which surprises me, but they tend to be the ones where they have very strong role modeling for what happens in that town. So for example, the Gold Coast, I had a really strong number of students put up their hands saying they knew what they wanted to do, but it all seemed to kind of center around what they've seen in their city. So whether it's tourism, hospitality, that kind of stuff, they seem to be really clear. So it is fascinating to observe the importance of role modeling and what they are actually seeing. So a beautiful strategy, I think, is to just, as I said before about exposure therapy, it's giving students a chance to see role models, whether in person or online or baked into case studies. And the more and more role models we can demonstrate, like in our curriculum and in classroom, I think is just beautiful. And that's something that we try to do at HEX is make these role models accessible through great videos or through sort of the courses that we do, or like virtual dial-in mentorships. Like we try to make sure that students have the chance to meet people that sort of live outside their town. So that's another strategy I'd employ.
And just probably one more point on that I encourage other schools to do. We're, closely working with our alumni. So again, it's really important that we have, towards the end of this term, our alumni coming back to talk to the girls around career pathways, future focus sort of areas. And it's really great to see that our past alumni come back and talk about, one of them, has created their own business, or some of them's doing engineering. But again, the girls then see themselves, if they can see past students as part of their school, also role modeling that there is different pathways.
Yes, I love that. And also just tracking your alumni, if possible. I know it's difficult to do. We've only just started tracking our alumni outcomes.
Yep.
And we're starting to see like 1 in 5 HEXs actually have started something, and 73% said they're more likely to start their business post a program.
That's amazing stats.
Which is really cool. Like, it's so cool to see.
Yeah.
And actually, the one I was really proud of was actually job creation, where I'm starting to see that they're creating jobs for the economy, which just blows my mind. But in the meantime, I wanted to pass you this next question. Are there tools or strategies that we actually use in the classroom, like facilitation tips that you might have to promote innovation?
I think, to promote innovation, we really need to look at the pedagogy behind it and to really unpack the thinking skills. So we use a lot of visible thinking at Strathcona. We use the design thinking principles. So again, we're creating the space where the girls know that they have to engage in a thinking process to sort of get to that end point of, coming up with their own, in the entrepreneurial unit, their own sort of business or ideas about, where the needs are. I think, with innovation, obviously we're in a fantastic space with digital tools. So again, a lot of the time we're using things like Canva, we're using Winks to make our own websites. We're trying to use Padlet and things to like share student ideas. We use Microsoft Teams. Obviously, good or bad, ChatGPT does help some of the girls with some of the things that they're thinking about. So I think it's also being conscious about what's the pedagogy you need behind what you're doing, and also what is the purpose of the tool. Like, again, if they're going to use Adobe Spark, like, why are we going to use that tool, and what's the purpose of that, rather than just giving them the digital tool. So I suppose we're conscious about, making sure that we're also unpacking with the students that what they're using and what it sort of links to.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually, because we tend to, obviously, the tools that you mentioned, yes, they're in our stack as well. We also try to do things like bringing in live, like, workplace tools into our application where we can. So that sometimes works better for older age groups, and it works beautifully for university age groups. But things like Slack, or even like Discord as like a Slack alternative where students like use it. I know that scares a lot of educators.
It scares maybe a few teachers when we talk about Discord at the moment, but yep.
Totally, Mike. I understand that. I think it's just interesting to think about, like, the style of, when they do go into the workplace, what kind of communication tools will they be using. So we do sometimes bring Slack in. We use like Notion pages as well a lot for them to create databases, and they can sort of publish live websites straight away. So very easy, low code, AI enabled stuff. And even when it comes to, I guess, facilitation online, so using a tool like Butter, which is like super engaging, lots of fun GIFs, you can do sound reacts, and basically it's very crazy on screen. We sort of do our best to keep things short and sharp. Like, even when it's videos, I'll do stuff like let them know how long the video is. Like, this is a 1-minute video. This is a 3-minute video. It's a bit long, but just stay with it. It's good. Like, this one's only 45 seconds, because I know what I'm like when I'm scrolling. If it's a long video, I'm going to flick it, and I know what they're like. So occasionally you just sort of like acknowledge, the way that they would use a digital tool and why, so to get them prepared. We definitely do have times when we use things like ChatGPT for purpose. So we will say, sometimes it's actually more about judging the work that comes back from it, a bit of critical thinking and analysis of what's come back from it, or even just fun things like getting it to describe how to draw an animal for like a younger group of students, which is something we did with the Camberwell Girls Grammar students, which is something fun and low impact, but gives them an idea of how hallucinations can happen and what kind of crazy outcomes can happen from this text. The other sort of something I just wanted to share about the way that we do in classroom versus, like, again, I'm not a professional teacher, but one thing I noticed that happens, which makes things interesting, is our innovation classrooms tend to be chaotic, and that's a little bit okay. So I think, like, we sort of shy away from like the shushing and the sitting. Like, we obviously want them to be paying attention, but for us, like, a noisy, chaotic classroom is beautiful. And I think that that's definitely something where we almost need to, when we work with educators and teachers who have spent their whole time trying to get them to behave, we want to make sure that it's like, we're okay with this. They're actually not misbehaving. This is by design. So I wonder how that sits with your mindset. Like, is that something that you disagree with, or?
No, I just think it's, I think all of us as teachers know that there's the right level of chaos, or you want the right level of buzz. So it's just like, I think all of us as teachers would be going, okay, yep, there is some energy in the classroom, but let's listen to it, or let's, like unpack it a little bit with our sort of questioning. But I definitely agree. Our students are doing some amazing group work. We've got our STEAM week coming up for years 5 to 8. So, they'll be workshopping using design principles, and I think, that's going to be great noise. Like if I walked past a workshop room with the years 5 to 8 in there and it was silence, I'd actually think, okay, we're delivering this wrong.
Yeah, exactly. That is so interesting. It's like the right kind of chaos. That's exactly. It's hard to pinpoint it, isn't it? Like what does it feel like?
And I think I've taught at boys' schools as well, and I think a few people online are at boys' schools too, and I think they can agree as well. Like, yeah, we need to embrace it, but we also need to harness the energy and make sure that we've got the sort of scaffold set up. In anything that you do in innovation, I think people get a little bit scared that it just means like everything is like thrown out the window. But I think when really great innovation and thinking happens, there is scaffolds around it. And that would be
100%.
my tip too. Yeah. And that's what your program is about as well. There's still the scaffolds there. It's not just doing something for the sake of doing something.
I think that's the perfect description. It's like the scaffolding of it. Like, it will be different in every room.
Yes.
I remember I worked with a project manager at ANZ, and she was like, Jeanette, agile and innovation does not mean disorganized. And I'm like, got it. I will never forget that. Thank you. Yeah. And I think that's definitely something to take into classroom too.
Well, maybe another scaffold is, we've got learning walls happening in our year 7 and 8 sort of space at the moment. And, that is to make sure that we have that organized sort of chaos and student thinking happening so they can see their learning. And that's great. Like I want our different teachers to add to it, or I want the students to, and the parents to know, we want to expand our learning, and here's the spot where you start to see it unravel.
Yeah, I love that. And a few of the ways that we try to like put those, I guess, punctuation marks into the days, or whether it's online or in person, we have. So we don't ever really do exams, but we do checkpoints. So we'll try to make sure that like throughout the day or whatever the experience is, they've got very specific things that are like due, and all of those things add up to that final sort of deliverable. So I think it's, when you're positioning it up front to let them know that none of the work is going to be thrown away. It's all going to be used.
Yes.
And I really like pressure. Like I like time pressure in innovation sort of pieces. We actually used to be called the hacker exchange. Nobody wanted to work with us when we were called that because like they thought we were trying to break into their systems. But when I say hacker, I kind of meant what can you do with limited resources?
Yes.
And in our situation, it tends to be time. What can you do with limited time? So we deliberately put pressure points in place, just to kind of get that spike of productivity.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I really love those comments coming through as well. Like
student agencies,
student agency agree, the constraints, right, open for creativity, but in place to facilitate. Like absolutely, completely agree. So thank you so much for those comments.
Yeah.
Now, what other questions do we have? There's a couple that came through on the list, but we were definitely going to talk about, we talked about this with the student engagement and empowerment. Do you have some beautiful examples of how a student has taken an innovation challenge and maybe, taken it to that next level for themselves? Like, have we seen?
I think really coming out of our Year 9 program, we see, even though it's, they work on their own entrepreneurship for a term, some of the girls have like expanded their businesses. Some of them continue to run their businesses for a little while. I think Pip wrote a comment just before about getting the right constraints and then allowing for their creativity. And I think that's what's really exciting when you open up the opportunities in our classrooms that we've had a design thinking project in sort of year 8. And again, it was just really amazing to see where the girls took it and also getting their family involved sort of in the project. So I think that the success stories are the fact that, when you open up your curriculum, or again, you really plan out that this is going to look different. We're going to focus on those mindsets or those skills rather than the content only, and give that student agency and freedom. Some of the students, and I think most people online will probably agree, some students that are those students that, might have been a bit disengaged in your classroom, or, you hadn't really allowed for their voice yet, really like blossom really quickly. And I think that's always the success, is when you allow those students to like be given the space to really show what they can do or what they're about.
Absolutely. I was thinking while you're talking about like some of the, and to answer this question on screen about ways to promote innovation in classroom.
Yes.
And I think maybe it's sometimes for us, it's about framing it, you know, for the right student, for the right outcome, right? So some students are really driven by that performance, the career, the portfolio, that kind of thing. So in that way, you could almost position doing the innovation project or the entrepreneurial project as being great for their future CV or being great for a future job interview. So those students who are kind of driven for that might like the fact that they could answer almost any job interview question using examples from this project. Other students we find are really community minded, so they really want to serve their community. So like positioning it as like problem solving for good is great for others. And some you kind of just get to say like, well, if you just don't know what you want to be, this is a really safe sandpit for you to experiment. Like we can kind of give them the chance to say, well, let's talk about if you were running a business, would you want to be the chief marketing officer or the chief technology officer or the CEO or the person that does the operations? Like you can kind of start to describe the workings of what a little business could look like. And then they can almost give themselves that title on the day. Like I'm CMO of this team. So like I'm in charge of the branding. And we find that can really sort of encourage students as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Okay. Where do we see the future heading in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship, future of education specifically? Kara, what do you think?
I think with the future of education at the moment, it's what you touched on before as well, Jeanette. It's like the job creation at the moment, we don't even know what some of the jobs are going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. So I think in most schools now, hopefully we're sort of starting to plan ahead to think future pathways are looking different, and how are we ensuring that we've built future ready learners rather than just worrying about getting to a final score with an ATAR. And I do think, we've recently surveyed our parents just around, what do they feel like is the what do they want to ensure that, Strathcona offers in teaching and learning. Obviously, a big part of our programming is, looking after that individual, supporting pathways, but they want, the learners to be future ready and to be adaptable, be able to critically think and be able to collaborate. Like I do think that's a big area that sometimes teachers go, oh, this is going to get messy. I don't want to do a collaboration task. But as we know with the entrepreneurial sort of units, or again, the team-based learning is so important, because that's, again, how you're going to work in the real world. So I think more and more that's where the future of education is heading, that it can't just be this stock standard model, that we have to be expanding our offerings in building those mindset thinking skills.
I think that's really interesting. Like about there's no way for us to predict exactly what the jobs are going to be, but we can employ things like futurist horizon scanning models, or like a pestle analysis to kind of go, well, for example, what if a rich lifestyle is democratized, like electric cars? What will that do to the power grids, to the politics, to the social dynamics, the engineering? And you can start to like use a prompt like that in classroom to get people really thinking about what if, and like really projecting that out 5, 10, 20 years time, and then kind of bringing that back to like, well, what does that mean I need to know today? And so look, we have this really interesting opportunity at HEX where we're in the room when things are happening. So we were at Microsoft in their AI room while they were launching stuff. We were at the Atlassian team conference when they're launching content. Actually, we were actually there when the Trello company was bought by an Aussie tech company. So like we're sort of plugged into industry, like hanging out at Seek and stuff. And so what I find challenging is I'm hearing all of this buzz in industry about what they're looking for in their employees. I'm sitting there going, who's going to tell the kids? Who's going to tell them about the world that they're about to walk into? Because their parents are only just getting their heads around what's happening in industry. Like educators and us, we're sitting just doing we're doing our jobs, doing the absolute best we can, but someone's got to tell the kids. So I think I really see a future where there's like awesome plugins and partnerships where like we can start to leverage the amazing expertise that's in the companies and industry. They're looking for people that are global. They're looking for people who can do just-in-time learning. They're looking for people who understand how to work with a team that's half human, half AI, So I think if we start to look at those trends and maybe find 1 or 2 ways that we can plug that into the classroom, even if it's just a singular project or a reflection piece or something like that, we'll be doing the students like such a great service just to give them a hint about what's coming, not to freak them out, but just to kind of get them a little bit more warmed up and prepared. So that's what I see.
But I think that's what's interesting about our learners, that, you know, our students are so, you know, on digital platforms all the time, you know, are reading exponentially about any topic they want to in a click of the button. I do think a lot of our students, you know, are ready for that challenge, but also the school needs to like scaffold sort of what that looks like. And also, like at Strathcona, we have like a Dean of Learning Futures. So again, we're talking about, you know, pathways pretty early in the piece. And again, we have that stronger understanding that education needs to be different, because not one person sort of learns the same anymore, even though we all probably went to school and had a very stock standard. Like, again, you know, working in industry like yourself and then, you know, totally flipping and changing into this amazing business, like the world is different and we need to be able to adapt to that.
Absolutely. And I think like just the fact that people are sending each other TikToks about how to learn how to do a new thing these days, like that is a totally different way of professional development. So now we're probably coming up to the time that we have, and I just wanted to say a massive thank you to you for your insights and expertise, and to our lovely audience for the questions and comments. It's really nice to know that we're all in this together. We're doing our absolute best to kind of bring the future of education to life together. There was a question about Wade and HEX and how we all work together. So we thought we'd bring Midzi back into the chat. But while Midzi's coming in, Kara, was there anything that you wanted to share with everybody about what Strathy's working on? Anything specific that, like, you know, you might offer to the audience about, like, from them to reach out to you or anything like that?
Oh, yes, definitely. If anyone has any further questions or wants some extra tips and tricks, definitely happy to be reached out to. I think a big part of, you know, when we're talking about the future of education too, Strathcona is working on, you know, learner profiles. So again, we're making sure that we're, you know, trying to build, and so the competencies are clear for, you know, even the students and the staff and the parents. So I think that's a big area that I'm interested in, and that I think a lot of schools will be working on. But yeah, definitely happy for anyone to reach out.
Awesome. There's one final question in there about effectively communicating the importance to parents. Did you want to just add a line in that before we bring Midzi on?
Sorry, I'm just quickly reading the question. Schools encouraging this book. Yes, I just think we try really as hard as we can. I think most schools would, to make sure our reporting and our communication with parents is pretty open and transparent, and parents are really supportive of us developing these skills with students. And that's a big area, but it's something that we really want to establish quickly, how we sort of create these learner profiles so the parents can start to really track how those skills are progressing across our school.
Yeah, it's a great tip. Something else we do is very like comms based. So we'll make sure that we've got maybe some editorial type things in the school newsletters of our partners that might be going out. We'll help to produce like short little clips and videos, which might sort of help to communicate things to parents. But honestly, like the most helpful thing we find is whether it's the testimonials from the girls or from industry. Yes. After hearing from industry partners what they're seeing in classrooms, what they'd like to hire, that tends to be really helpful as well. And of course, I'll share with you in just a moment about some of the things that HEX is doing to make it all feel a bit more solid from a academic, like uni perspective as well. So Midzi, did you want to share a little bit about like what Wade does to help people get ready to bring the innovation futures to life?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jeanette, and thanks for a great conversation. I love that who's going to tell the kids. That is so important. I think that's why HEX is so relevant to what we do. So Wade has the Upschool Educator program, which is about bringing entrepreneurial thinking into the classroom. It's an exciting 3-day immersive program, putting teachers into the role of being entrepreneurs and what it feels like to be an entrepreneur. So they're immersing themselves in it. And I think a key to it is we have both teachers facilitating and entrepreneurs. So you get both sides, how you can bring the entrepreneurial learning back into the classroom. And I think many teachers go away just feeling full of excitement. I first heard about HEX. I believe I met you, Jeanette, at Haileybury College one time, and just hearing about how they were using the program. Their teachers come to the Upschool program, learn about bringing entrepreneurial thinking into the classroom. They have a great program, as do so many schools that we come across. And then they, of course, in year 10, they utilise HEX to just develop the students' opportunity to find their own agency and take it the next step. And almost, I think the students, as my understanding, because I've met some of them, they almost do the learnings themselves, which is, I think, fantastic, because they, in that way, become the teachers and the student. And I think there's nothing better than learning to teach is a way to be a great student. So I think that's been a great connection, to know that the teachers have extra tools in HEX down the track.
Yeah,
what do you think, Jeanette?
Well, I thought I'd just share a couple of the specific programs coming up. So what we actually do is we provide the scaffolding that Kara was referring to support educators. So we don't necessarily come and activate everything in your classroom. We know that you are the best, like educators are the best owners and custodians of that learning experience. But what we do provide is a really beautifully structured program, which includes the checkpoints. It includes lots of video content from experts around the innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem. So everyone from the founder of UpBank to people who are in Google SaaS sales and all sorts of different things. We will provide also the checkpoints being designed. And if people choose to, they can either take it in class and activate it themselves with teacher guides, so more of like a content support, or you can actually allow our team to come in and do online masterclasses once a week. As well as provide drop-in mentor hours. So we'll actually go and organise the people from Telstra, Seek, Modibody, whatever it is, to actually be online, ready for drop-ins for your students. And then they can actually have that opportunity to do a drop-in after school, talk about their CV, bounce project ideas around with industry, all supervised by our team, who's all working with Children Checked. And that actual, as like a package, is called HEX High Accelerator. It's 6 weeks long, and it comes with a credential from the University of Sydney, which actually is equivalent to one university subject. So should that student choose to do university in the future, they've already done an elective and they can knock off a subject from uni. So that's what HEX does for high school teachers. And then we can visit them, we can hang out with the students again at university when they come through to that level. So yeah, we're all about sort of just empowering more people. And if you do want also a free workshop, there's a few available through the Academy of Enterprising Girls. And if you are curious about HEX High, I know that we can share an end of financial year offer with everybody as well.
Fantastic. I think that's a lovely spot to end where we are. I'd like to thank Jeanette and Kara for the great feedback, and to just give a little tip and a shout out to Luke Kellier, who I believe is there now, and his Ed Leaders Australia podcast, who like to end with 3 learnings. So 3 of the things I've taken away from today are that less about content, and that it's more about what the students can do with the learnings. And I love the old expression, learning to learn, which I just think is going to be fundamental moving forward, because as we said, Google and AI makes the answers at our fingertips, but how we use those learnings is key. The importance, and a shout out to everyone who's listening to this, the importance of educators who want to make a difference. You out there clearly do, because you're here, and I think that enthusiasm you can bring into the classroom was shared by Jeanette and Kara. And I really love the idea that learning is an evolution. It's not a past and a future. It's a slow progression and change. It might be getting faster, but we can all take our learnings and experiences forward. So big thank you to Jeanette and Kara. I'd like to end by saying the Upschool Educator Program, the next intake is in June. We have a couple more places. So if there are schools interested, please be in touch with me at the Wade Institute of Entrepreneurship. And I'd like to end it there. And a big thank you to Jeanette and Kara.
Thanks, Mitzi.
Thank you, everyone out there.
Everyone.
And thanks to Caden behind the scenes as well. Appreciate you.
Absolutely, Caden. Great work, mate. Thank you.
All right. See you, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.